The Millionaire's incredible encounter with a hidden truth that transformed everything. Ethan Remington sat in his penthouse office high above the vibrant chaos of the metropolis. The vast city sprawled beneath him, an infinite sea of steel and glass, where each towering skyscraper gleamed as a testament to his wealth and ambition. But in that moment, the view offered no solace. Instead, it exacerbated the gnawing emptiness within him. He shifted in his leather chair, fingers rhythmically tapping the polished oak desk, reflecting the agitation swirling in his mind. His father, Jack, was sick back in their modest Midwestern hometown, and Ethan wrestled with the suffocating sense of duty that now clashed with his relentless pursuit of success. Days blurred into a cycle of meetings and negotiations, with dents of anxiety accumulating each time he received an update about Jack's condition. The thought of returning home felt like an insurmountable mountain. Would his father understand the choices he had made? A tightening in his chest warned him of assumptions and regrets, as if the very fabric of his identity hung in the balance. He craved his father's approval, but feared the confrontation. Torn between familial duty and the demands of his high-stakes lifestyle, he felt like a marionette cut from its strings, floating aimlessly in his fabricated success. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Returning home was inevitable after the call from the hospital. The drive down familiar roads only deepened his conflict, his father's world clashing violently with his own. What would it mean for him to step back into that simpler life? As he rummaged through the attic of his childhood home, memories gripped him with nostalgia that morphed into dread. There, underneath a dusty box of old toys, he uncovered a sealed envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it, revealing a letter that spoke of a grand ancestral estate. Surreal tales of resilience emerged within its pages, tales that once belonged to a lineage lost in the rush of modernity. Anguish surged as he read about the developers circling like vultures, eager to exploit his family's legacy. They saw a mere commodity. Ethan felt the tug of responsibility like a weight on his shoulders. His heart raced with contradictions. Should he protect his family history, or should he seize this opportunity to amplify his own success? Could he transform the estate into a beacon of hope for his lineage, or would he falter, seduced by the allure of temptation?
Profit? The air grew thick with tension as Ethan grappled with the moral quagmire. His thoughts spiraled into a cacophony of doubt and ambition, and just as clarity began to form, the shadow of his father's furrowed brow echoed within him. Would his father ever forgive him for abandoning their legacy? The stakes climbed with ruthless intensity. Every choice felt like a reset of his identity, a gamble on who he might become. At the intersection of gilded dreams and rugged honesty, Ethan stood poised to redefine success, yet the unresolved knot in his gut tightened further. How did one measure a life well lived? Was it in the monstrous heights of his skyscrapers, or did it dwell in the resonance of stories told by family bonds? The room quaked with uncertainty, leaving a lingering ache that promised either liberation or loss. Ethan's pulse quickened as he stared at the letter, feeling the weight of his family's legacy bear down on him. The estate wasn't merely a piece of property, it was a sanctuary filled with memories that defined who he was. It was his father's world, a realm untouched by the ruthless ambitions that had shaped his own life. The walls of that house had ousted laughter, heartbreak, and the universal struggles of human existence. It was a life steeped in authenticity, contrasting sharply with the facade he had built around his skyscraper ambitions. For years, the relentless pursuit of success had blurred his vision. Yet in this moment of vulnerability, surrounded by the echoes of his childhood, Ethan realized he had sacrificed not just connections, but his very essence. His reluctance to return had stemmed from fear of judgment, fear of failure, and, above all, fear of facing the person he had become. Deciding to protect the estate ignited a spark within him. Perhaps it was a chance for redemption. He could not let it foully succumb to the developer's greed. Instead, he contemplated how to reinvigorate the derelict place, a grand narrative lost in the rush of modernity. With renewed purpose, he envisioned transforming the estate into a community center, an establishment celebrating their family's heritage while weaving it into the future. But was this the right move? Ethan scrutinized the decision through layers of conflict. Would a community venture grant him the redemption he so desperately sought, or would it be a masquerade, cloaking his deeper desires for power and recognition? Treading into uncharted waters, he felt a tumult with every calculated thought. His phone buzzed, slicing through his introspection. It was a message from his business partner, Angela, an update on the negotiations for a lucrative real estate deal. The prospect of increasing his wealth beckoned seductively, luring him back toward the very life he had been questioning. He hesitated, fingers hovering above the screen. The text flickered tantalizingly, but the excitement it typically sparked felt dull in comparison to the call of his past. Suddenly, the reality of his decisions seemed crippling. A part of him longed to indulge in the cutthroat world of finance that had bred him, while another yearned to disentangle from it entirely. As he flipped the letter over, the address of the estate scratched against his palm, almost pleading for his attention. Ethan shot up from the chair. He needed to confront this legacy. The whispers of his childhood dared him to be bold. Could he truly dismantle the person he had become to reclaim the one he had lost? This home held more than bricks and mortar. It cradled the secrets of his ancestry and values that had ripened with time. Clutching the envelope tightly, he stepped toward the window, watching the city pulse below like a living entity. The glimmers of financial triumph paled compared to the richness of returning to a purpose rooted in family and moral conviction. Yet, the inevitability of return was met with an unsettling truth. Conflicts would arise. His business acquaintances would see the shift as weakness, while familial expectations would press on him to uphold the traditions of sacrifice integral to his family's journey. Ethan resolved to move forward, but with every powerful decision came the knowledge that facing his past wouldn't be painless. The time had come to confront both the developers and the ghosts of his own choices. The weight of his destiny pressed against him. Could he write a new story without losing himself in the process? Standing tall against the horizon's glow, Ethan whispered to himself, this was merely the beginning. One path embraced his complex identity as a businessman, while the other beckoned him to reconvene with his roots. What lay ahead awaited his brazen spirit, for he had yet to face the developers and his own father. As the sun dipped, casting shadows of uncertainty, Ethan took a deep breath. The confrontation awaited him. He had to determine who he was before it was too late. Ethan arrived at the estate just as twilight cast an ethereal glow over the crumbling facade. The air was thick with nostalgia, each gust of wind tugging at his memories. He stepped through the gates, a mix of trepidation and determination coursing through him. Each footfall on the familiar gravel felt like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. He was no longer simply a businessman. He was a son, a steward of his family's legacy, confronted with the remnants of lives that once flourished within these walls. He approached the heavy wooden door and paused. The home carried an aura of comfort, yet it clung to shadows of past conflicts. Would he find resolution here, or merely more unresolved questions? He inhaled deeply, pushed the door open, and felt the musty air grieve him like an old friend. The faded wallpaper and worn furniture held stories. They invited him to listen. Ethan wandered through the living room, tracing the contours of the furniture with his fingertips. He halted at the mantel, the place where family photos had once captured moments of joy. There was his father's proud smile, arms around Ethan and his siblings. He closed his eyes, allowing the emotions to wash over him. Regrets and untold stories emerged like specters, each demanding acknowledgement. In the kitchen, a familiar scent lingered, a hint of spices, the essence of home-cooked meals, laughter, and familial support. He glanced at the empty table, where he once shared meals with loved ones who had now departed. A knot tightened in his chest as he recognized what had truly been sacrificed for a life filled with ambition, genuine connection. He couldn't help but question his past decisions: profit over relationships, success over substance. Ethan's phone buzzed again, this time persistent and annoying. It was Angela, again urging him to jump back into the world of deals and negotiations. He frowned at the screen, torn between appetite for financial success and the desire to reclaim the simplicity of love and connection. Instead of responding, he powered the device down and pocketed it, deciding that the moment called for introspection, not distractions. Determined to make the estate resonate with life once again, he began mentally drafting plans. What if they could host workshops that celebrated their family's legacy, weaving together the past and the present? He envisioned artists gathering to restore the garden, musicians playing under the stars, children learning the values of craftsmanship and community. This place could be a cradle for dreams, and in that vision he felt the stirrings of hope. Yet fear crept in uninvited. How would he finance such a venture? Would he find the allies needed to stand against the developers who saw the estate only as an opportunity for profit? His heart sank under the weight of his anxiety and self-doubt. The luminaries of his business world cast long shadows over this new ambition, ready to label him as foolish, weak, or worse, one who had forsaken the bright lights of his former life. His internal battle raged on as he wandered to the parlor where the grand piano sat, dust-covered but still dignified. As he ran his fingers over the keys, the familiar chords of his childhood echoed back to him. Each note invited the possibility of healing and renewal, something he desperately wanted to grasp. With a renewed sense of determination, Ethan understood that he had choices to make. He could decide to face the criticisms of the business realm and follow the path to something greater than mere wealth. But could he embrace both worlds, the investor and the custodian of heritage, without forfeiting his essence? Just then, the sharp chime of a doorbell rang through the silence, startling him. A visitor? A dilemma? He braced himself, realizing the time had come to confront the reality of this unexpected moment. Who stood outside? Temptation or transformation? With his heart racing and purpose igniting within him, Ethan moved toward the door, ready to meet whatever awaited him. Ethan paused before the door, a tidal wave of questions crashing against his resolve. He could almost hear the whispers of his past, where once there had been laughter, now only uncertainty swirled. With a steadying breath, he grasped the handle and pulled the door open. Before him stood an elderly woman dressed in a faded floral frock, her silver hair tied back in a loose bun. Her weathered face broke into a warm, albeit tentative smile. "Ethan," she said softly. It was Agnes, the estate's longtime caretaker. He hadn't seen her in years, yet there was a familiarity that sent a rush of warmth through him. "Agnes, he stumbled, thoughts of all he planned to say dissipating under the simple weight of seeing her again. She looked as though she had stepped from a time capsule, and suddenly he was flooded with memories. The stories she shared, the wisdom she imparted, the way she tended the gardens with love and care. "I hoped you'd return," she said, her voice a fluttering whisper against the evening air. "This place has missed you, you know." Ethan's pulse quickened. How could this woman understand what he intended to do? He was standing on the precipice of a life-changing decision, caught between the chains of his past and the flickering promise of his future. "I've been thinking about starting some workshops, bringing people back here," he managed to say, his voice trembling with uncertainty. Agnes nodded thoughtfully,
her gaze searching his face. "You'd need help, Ethan. It's a big task for one person, even for a man who's done well in business." Her eyes, deep pools of experience, held him steady. "But what are you doing to help yourself?" Her question peeled back layers he thought he had buried. Was he truly helping himself, or merely running toward fleeting ambitions? The foundation of success he'd built felt like sand between his fingers. He had chased after deals, after wealth, but had left behind something integral to his spirit in the process. "Those questions haunt me," he admitted, glancing past her into the darkening surroundings of the estate. "It's like I lost sight of what truly mattered." The sincerity of his words hung between them, pulsating with sincerity. "Sometimes it's the simplest things that bring the most joy," she said, stepping further inside. "Remember the piano? Your father played every Sunday, and your mother would sing. People would gather. They found solace here. You can revive that if you wish." Ethan's heart quickened at the thought. Could he really recreate those cherished moments? The chords of music mingling with laughter? The vision was intoxicating, but doubt draped itself over his shoulders like a shroud. "I don't know if my vision can match their legacy. I'm not as talented, nor do I have experience." Agnes waved a dismissive hand. "You have potential, Ethan, but it's not just about talent. It's about the will to bring people together. Think about what you want to convey. Your company closed doors, yet you can open them here. Don't underestimate your strength." As her words sank in, something shifted inside him. The paradox of his life, running from the life he once cherished to embrace success, now seemed starkly clear. Perhaps the missing piece wasn't talent, but heart. What if he could blend his business acumen with authenticity and service? "What if I fail?" he questioned, the fear previously cloaked in bravado now surfacing with clarity. "Failure is not a finale. It's a step in the process. Embrace the lessons instead of fearing the loss," she replied, her intensity unwavering. There was a silence that filled the room, broken only by the distant sound of the wind rustling through the trees. A flicker of determination ignited within Ethan. He had to confront this deep-seated fear and learn to take risks, to be vulnerable. "Help me," he implored. "Help me bring this vision to life." A smile broke across Agnes's features, seeing the spark of purpose aflame within him. "Let's start with the garden and the piano. We'll breathe life back into this house, together." As they began to plan, the weight on Ethan's shoulders lifted. A hint of what was possible began to emerge. However, with every undertaking came the shadows lurking in the background. The developers, his old life's expectations, and the haunting disconnection from his family. Just then, his phone buzzed sharply, jolting him from his newfound resolve. It was Angela again, and this time her message felt more urgent, more demanding, as if his past was clutching at him. He stared at the screen, a choice looming. Would he answer her call to return to a world of networking and profits, or would he commit to a heart-driven journey, even amidst the uncertainty? In that crucial moment of indecision, he felt the ground shift again beneath him, setting the stage for a confrontation he could no longer ignore. Would he remain tethered to the expectations of his past, or would he bravely step onto this new path? The true test of his metamorphosis awaited. Ethan felt the weight of his phone in his hand like an anvil, its screen glowing ominously in the dim light of the estate. The name Angela loomed larger than it should have, an embodiment of expectations he had long-standing commitments to. Just yesterday, success in the corporate realm felt as integral to his identity as breathing. But standing in the hollow comfort of the estate, his vision started to shift. "Do I uphold their expectations?" he whispered to himself, the words barely escaping his lips. The ghosts of his past, predicated on spreadsheets and quarterly earnings, seemed to whisper back, "Yes." Yet, Agnes's warm yet probing gaze anchored him, urging him to reconsider. "Ah, the digital world calling you back," Agnes chimed in, amusement and understanding dancing in her tone. "What does your gut say, Ethan?" He clenched his jaw, battling an internal tempest. His mind raced with the possibilities of what awaited him in the corporate sector. Endless meetings, polished presentations, and relentless pressure boiled into visions of triumph. But embedded within that imagery lurked a specter he
could no longer ignore. "I built a career on convenience," he muttered, eyes drawn to the patterns of peeling wallpaper. "It's more about maintaining appearances than purpose." "Precisely," Agnes interjected, her voice softening as she stepped closer. "You've got a choice. Remain bound to the bubble of illusion or risk stepping into the uncertain but genuine." Ethan's heart quickened, a pulse of defiance stirring in him. The thought of crafting something meaningful began to take root, but Angela's name still reverberated in his consciousness. An urgent message hung unprocessed on his screen, a tether to a world that once consumed his spirit. "Let's call her," Agnes suggested, reading the discomfort etched across Ethan's forehead. "But frame your response carefully." The thought unsettled him. Could he construct a masterful response that negated obligation while prioritizing authenticity? The flutter of anxiety lingered beneath his resolve as he pressed the green button, prepared to mold that moment into something empowering. "Angela," he greeted, his voice steadying as he spoke into the receiver. She wasted no time diving into work-related inquiries, her voice a polished catalog of demands layered under an urgency that felt suffocating. He found himself nodding along, but his mind whirred with rebellion. The vision Agnes stirred in him simmered beneath the surface. "Ethan," she continued, "we need to finalize the partnership deal by end of week. This is crucial for the trajectory you've set." "Right," he replied, eyes darting around the estate, searching for clarity. The creaking of the old floors beneath felt like echoes of his childhood, a nostalgic reminder that perhaps this was where his true sense of sustenance resided. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, a flicker of resolve igniting. "Actually, Angela, I'm reconsidering some recent commitments," he interrupted, a surge of conviction swelling in his chest. "I need time to redefine what success personally means." There was a moment of stunned silence, a crack in their exchange. "Are you serious?" she asked, her tone blooming with disbelief. "I am," he said firmly, surprised by the clarity spilling from his mouth. "I can't continue to pour into something that feels hollow." "That's reckless, Ethan. What about your reputation?" Angela's voice came sharper now, the fissure in their relationship laid bare. "It's what I need, Angela," Ethan countered, his voice gaining strength. "This could be an opportunity for me to grow, more than just in business." The weight of his decision was both liberating and daunting. The realization that he was shedding parts of himself he no longer needed felt cathartic. As they hung up, a newfound clarity coursed through him, but it remained entwined with the haunting specters from his past. He was forging ahead, but the faces of his corporate allies loomed in weight, their expectations heavy like a shroud. Agnes watched him, warmth illuminating her features. "You've taken a step, Ethan. Now let's build from here." And just like that, a fluttering anticipation filled the room. Together, they chose the garden to start their efforts, envisioning each bloom as a metaphor for transformation, a process in which, just as roots found nourishment, he too might flourish. But even as they laughed, a shadowy apprehension hung over him, whispering caution, reminding him that change invited turbulence. Behind his blossoming determination loomed Angela's disapproval and the tightening grip of professional expectations. Was he truly prepared for the test of his metamorphosis? Just as they dived into planning, Ethan received another message that diverted his attention. A name he hadn't anticipated seeing. A past colleague who once had designs on his career, now seeking an audience with him. The past was clawing back,
and he braced for the confrontation of choices that would challenge the very essence of who he was becoming. Ethan stared at the screen, heart racing as he considered the implications of the message. It was from Jordan, an old colleague whose ambition had once intimidated him. Driven by a ruthless determination, Jordan had a knack for uncovering opportunities that others overlooked. Now, with a simple ping, Ethan was reminded of a version of himself that felt trapped in the very world he was trying to escape. "Agnes," he began, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "It's Jordan. He wants to meet." The gravity of the name hung heavily in the air. Agnes raised an eyebrow, catching the flicker of fear in Ethan's gaze. "What do you think he wants? Closure, or something more?" Ethan felt the vice of doubt tightening. That question forced him to confront the ghosts of his past. Not just memories of his corporate climb, but the shadow of ambition that had weaved through every decision he made. "When we worked together, I often felt overshadowed," he admitted. "Maybe he wants to pull me back in. Or maybe he wants to challenge the new direction you've chosen," Agnes offered, leaning closer, her expression a blend of curiosity and concern. That could very well be true. As he grappled with the prospect of facing Jordan, two paths lay before him. One invited him back into the familiar confines of corporate success, filled with accolades and recognition. The other beckoned him to stay true to his newfound purpose, one that revolved around authenticity and personal growth. "What does a meeting even hold for me now?" he muttered, frustration flaring momentarily. What could possibly interest him in my decision to step away? "Perhaps it's worth exploring what Jordan wants," Agnes suggested, her tone measured yet encouraging. "You may uncover something valuable about him and about yourself." After a long pause, Ethan clicked reply before he could reconsider. "Let's meet, tomorrow." Confidence surged through him, a testament to how far he had come in the past few days. But with the decision came a familiar wave of anxiety. If Jordan was searching for something more, a strategic alliance or a chance to sway him back into the old fold, could he still stand for what he now believed? The morning unfolded with a nervous tension. The sun poured into the estate, illuminating the garden where he had envisioned growth, yet his thoughts remained clouded. The birds chirping outside felt discordant compared to the turmoil brewing within. He paced, running through potential scenarios in his mind. Would he narrowly escape Jordan's palpable drive, or would he find himself ensnared once again in the expectations engineered by others? As he walked into the cafe where they had agreed to meet, anxiety tinged with anticipation washed over him. The familiar scent of coffee mixed with pastries wrapped around him, a reminder of countless meetings once perceived as simple rituals. But this one was different. He wasn't walking into this meeting as Ethan the corporate ladder climber. He was stepping into it as Ethan the seeker of purpose. He spotted Jordan sitting at a corner table, the same calculative expression etched onto his features. Their eyes met, and within that moment lingered unspoken history, buried ambitions, and the challenges ahead. The stakes were higher than just a conversation over coffee. It felt like a crossroad where his past could either pull him back into a world that felt suffocating or force him to confront the uncomfortable truth of his choices. "What do you want, Jordan?" Ethan blurted out as he approached the table, his voice gaining an unexpected assertiveness. With a slight grin, Jordan leaned forward, the glimmer of familiarity mixed with something more formidable in his eyes. "I think it's time we talked about the next big opportunity and what it might mean for both of us." Ethan's pulse quickened. Could this be the test of his rebuild? What if weighing these options released fears he thought were vanquished? The past was not just clawing back, it was breathing down his neck, and the fight for who he wanted to become was set into motion. As the conversation began to unfold, every word felt like a brush against the carefully sculpted walls he was attempting to build around his new identity. Suddenly, there was a crack beneath the surface, and it left Ethan wondering what truth was awaiting him that could alter everything he had been working towards. Ethan sat across from Jordan, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on his chest. Each second felt elongated in the quiet of the cafe as chatter swirled around them. It was a stark contrast to the internal chaos whirling within him. Here was the person who had once seen Ethan not just as a colleague, but as a rival, a person whose ambitions had always outstripped his own. Today, however, he was stepping into the arena not as an underdog, but as someone determined to carve out his own path. Jordan cleared his throat, a subtle signal that he was about to dive in. "I understand you're on a different path now. I want to know more about it. We could be a powerful team again." The cool confidence in Jordan's voice was unmistakable, but Ethan could detect a slight tremor beneath the surface, a hint of desperation hidden in the charisma. Ethan leaned back, his posture betraying a mix of defiance and contemplation. "What makes you think I'm interested in going back?" His words surprised him. They came out with more conviction than he anticipated, a clear sign of how much he had transformed in spirit. He was no longer just a spectator influenced by Jordan's ambitions. Because some opportunities are too good to pass up, you can bring a fresh perspective, and together we could dominate the sector. Jordan's eyes widened slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan could see the shadowy reflection of the person he used to be, a reflection that he was striving to leave behind. "But at what cost?" Ethan challenged, pushing further, emboldened. "Do you think I've spent the last few months pursuing authenticity just to abandon it for something that feels like a hollow pursuit of success?" Silence enveloped them, Jordan's facade cracking ever so slightly. "I didn't mean, you know." "Jordan, that's exactly what you mean," Ethan interrupted, frustration boiling beneath the surface. "Your idea of success and of our partnership revolves around profit margins and market shares. I've realized that there's more to life than just climbing the corporate ladder. I've found purpose in what I do now, and it doesn't align with what you represent." The air shifted, the momentum of their conversation taking a pointed turn. Jordan's expression faltered as he finally comprehended the profound transformation Ethan had undergone. "But we could be incredible together, your experience and my vision." "Is this about your vision or your ego?" Ethan cut him off, his voice steady, testing the boundaries of his old self. It felt exhilarating, each word sharpened with the clarity of true self-awareness. "You're not offering me a partnership, you're extending a lifeline back into a world that already hurt me." Jordan's eyes narrowed, and behind the confidence lay a flicker of unease. Ethan could sense the shifting power dynamics. This was no longer a battle for control, but a lining up of truths. "I thought we were friends," Jordan said, his voice quieter now. "Friends don't manipulate. Friends help each other grow, not suffocate under the weight of ambition. If you want to talk about the past, fine, but if it's a partnership you're after, it has to be built on mutual respect, a respect you haven't shown me until now." Ethan felt a tight knot in his stomach. He was grasping the reins of both the conversation and his own identity. Every moment spent with Jordan was a test of his resolve, inviting him to either slip back into complacent submission or stand firm in his newfound self-worth. With a final breath, he had to decide how to conclude this encounter. "If you're open to genuine change, maybe we can talk. But if it's just about leveraging my experience for your gain, I'm afraid this conversation ends here." An electric silence filled the space around them. Ethan felt exposed, yet empowered, ready to defend his convictions, but also terrified of the possibilities waiting outside the door. Cafe. Would he bolster his resolve, or allow the allure of opportunity to ensnare him again? Jordan considered him for a long moment, and for the first time, Ethan observed a trace of respect in his eyes. "You've changed more than I realized. Let's talk again when you're ready." As Ethan walked away, a sense of uncertainty intertwined with a newfound strength surged through him. The path ahead was foggy, but he knew one thing for sure. The encounter had ignited questions about not just his past, but his future. And as he stepped outside, the world felt both daunting and exhilarating. What would he discover about himself on this path of authenticity? And could there be a way to create something new out of the ashes of his old ambitions? Ethan stepped onto the bustling street, the world illuminated by the warm, golden light of the setting sun. It was almost surreal, the way the skyline loomed over him, both familiar and foreign. His heart raced, fueled by the remnants of the confrontation with Jordan. Every step forward felt like a reckoning, a physical manifestation of his commitment to authenticity. Yet, doubt crept into his thoughts, like shadows lengthening with dusk. He found himself walking without direction, caught in the ebb and flow of foot traffic, each passerby a reminder of choices he had to make. Ethan reflected on Jordan's words. Were they truly offering a partnership, or merely a chance to tether himself back to an unhealthy ambition? The allure of success had shown its face so many times, promising security and respect, but had always hidden the weight of betrayal and loss beneath its shiny veneer. Yet, each moment outside the cafe brought forth clarity, igniting a determination in him to forge his own path. It was time to actively engage with the creative agency he had dreamt of, one grounded in purpose, not profit. He hadn't just walked away from Jordan, he had walked toward something much bigger, something that could foster growth. Ethan pulled out his phone, navigating to the contacts where dozens of ideas for his agency lingered, half-formed thoughts that were now coalescing into a direction. He envisioned a space where creativity could flourish without the halt of doubt or manipulation, something fresh, something that resonated with his renewed sense of identity. He recalled the conversation with his mentor, Sarah, who had once told him, "Don't chase the light, become it." Those words echoed in his mind, urging him to refine his vision. It was time to connect with like-minded individuals who valued integrity as much as creativity. He quickly typed out a message to Sarah, seeking advice on building a team that could share his vision. But as the anxiety slipped from his grasp, a more unsettling thought began to gnaw at him. What if his principles were not universally accepted? The competitive world of marketing could be ruthless, and he had often seen how quickly passion could be extinguished by self-serving interests. The bitterness of his past connection with Jordan loomed in the forefront of his mind. It served as a reminder of the work ahead. Could he sustain his newfound integrity amidst constant temptations? As he walked toward his apartment, Ethan's resolve hardened. He needed to establish not only the foundation of his agency, but also the guiding principles that would govern it. Would he ensure that everyone involved shared a commitment to give back, not just to take? Could he avoid the pitfalls of his past and cultivate a culture of collaboration over competition? The decision felt monumental. He was staring into the face of change, prepared to claim his narrative. Yet the specter of disillusionment whispered in his ear. Ethan took a deep breath, imagining the launch of his agency. Perhaps it could be a force for good, a stark contrast to the world he had known with Jordan. He could create a culture that elevated voices, that didn't just seek market dominance, but sought to enrich lives. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting a twilight glow, Ethan resolved to make the first step in launching meetings with creatives he had met throughout the years, acknowledging that it would require vulnerability to establish something authentic. Just as he reached his door, a sudden text notification lit up his screen. It was Jordan again, asking for a follow-up meeting. The excitement and the dread crashed within him at this moment. Would this signal a door reopening to an old chapter, or an unexpected opportunity to set boundaries anew? Ethan paused, contemplating the potential direction of this conversation. The weight of possibility hung heavy. The future lay before him yet again, tantalizingly close, and the choice would shape everything. What would he decide when faced with the ghost of his past ambitions? Ethan stood frozen before his door, his mind a tumult of thoughts. The message from Jordan was an open wound, stirring memories he had worked hard to dislodge.
He could almost hear the echoes of clashing ideas, late-night arguments, and the sharp edge of betrayal that had marked their previous collaboration. Yet here he was, on the cusp of something new, staring into uncertainty, the text message vibrating in his pocket like a restless spirit. Against the backdrop of fading light, Ethan's heart raced, a rhythm of adrenaline fueling his thoughts. He could respond with cautious skepticism. Perhaps this was a test of his resolve, a chance to assert the principles he was so fiercely committed to. But to ignore the request felt like denying a part of his history, a history that shaped who he had become. After a heavy pause, he settled in front of his laptop, the blue glow washing over him like a promise of clarity. He needed to unpack Jordan's ongoing influence in his life. The meeting could serve as more than just a reopening of old wounds. It could provide a much-needed perspective on boundaries. Armed with both trepidation and excitement, he opened a new and began to outline his thoughts. What did he want to accomplish? He needed to organize his goals, define what success meant for him now, and articulate the values that would govern his new agency. Trust, integrity, collaboration. These weren't mere buzzwords, they were lifelines. Ethan typed them with deliberate strokes, each word resonating with purpose as he molded them into a manifesto of sorts. Each principle seemed to breathe life into the blank page, stoking the fires of determination within him. He thought about the creatives he admired, people who navigated the chaotic waters of the marketing world without compromising their ideals. They didn't just offer a dazzling product, they told stories that connected, resonated, and built communities. These were the voices he wanted to amplify. Yet beneath this rush of inspiration lay the persistent fear that he might not be able to weather the storm. Would it actually be possible to carve out a space in a cutthroat industry that thrived on competition and ego? He couldn't shake the nagging doubt that somewhere within the industry, greed would eventually blind those with the purest intentions. His phone buzzed again, Jordan's name lighting up the screen once more. This time it felt like an ultimatum. He could either control the narrative of his life or let Jordan reignite the flames of his past uncertainty. The thought triggered a wave of frustration. Was he truly ready to step into this meeting without the armor of defensiveness? Taking a deep breath, Ethan made a choice. He would welcome the confrontation, but with cautious optimism. This meeting might just provide the insight he needed to reinforce his boundaries, pushing him further into authentic leadership. He grabbed a fresh pad of paper and jotted down his key intentions for the meeting. However, as he prepared, another thought slithered through his resolve. What if Jordan had changed? The pang of betrayal hung heavy in the air, as Ethan couldn't shake his distrust. But he had to remind himself, self-discovery came often on the precipice of discomfort. With a renewed sense of purpose, he sent a quick, decisive response to Jordan, arranging the meeting for the next day. It was a calculated risk, but one that could potentially galvanize his own agency. Ethan closed his laptop and stood up, stretching out the tension that had settled into his shoulders. He needed to clear his mind, so he decided to take a walk, moving past the immediacy of confrontation toward a broader vision of what was to come. And as he stepped outside, the evening air felt different, charged with potential. Ethan took a moment to absorb the sounds of the city, fists clenched, ready to engage in a dialogue that could either unearth his fears or pave the way for his liberation. What confrontation awaited him? And would he emerge stronger or more entangled in the past he had fought so hard to escape? Ethan sat in the cafe the next day, a tide of emotions washing over him. The air was thick with anticipation as he waited for Jordan. His heart thrummed not just with nerves, but with a burgeoning resolve. This was not merely a meeting, it was an inflection point, a chance to define who he truly wanted to be in both his personal and professional life. When Jordan finally arrived, his presence radiated the same self-assuredness that had once intimidated Ethan. Yet, having come so far in his journey toward authenticity, Ethan felt emboldened. He was no longer just the ambitious employee seeking approval. He was a man ready to confront his past,
anchored in his newfound purpose. "Thanks for meeting me," Jordan said, sliding into the chair across from him. The polite smile did not reach his eyes. Ethan took a deep breath and began. "I want to be transparent. I've been reflecting deeply about my journey and my values since we last spoke. This meeting isn't just a formality. It's about what we're truly building in our careers and whether our visions align." "Let's cut to the chase," Jordan replied, leaning forward. "I think we can capitalize on some new projects together. Your expertise and my weight in the industry, just imagine what we could accomplish." It was the response Ethan anticipated, yet the seed of doubt remained. "I'm not interested in collaborations that don't stand for something deeper. I've found that success for its own sake leaves me empty," he asserted, his voice steady. "I want to create work that reflects integrity and purpose." "Are you really going to throw away potential?" Jordan asked, incredulity etched on his face. "You've built a career on driving results. What's changed?" Meeting Jordan's gaze, Ethan realized this was the moment of truth. Could he articulate his transformation? "What's changed is that I've recognized the importance of meaning in my work. I want to help brands tell authentic stories, not just chase profits. Equally important, I'm dedicated to nurturing creative voices that are often overlooked." "So you're saying you'd rather take the back seat for the sake of ideals?" Jordan shot back defensively. "It's not about taking a back seat. It's about creating a new path, one that resonates with who I am. The chains of ambition, competitive edge, and societal fetters are no longer my goals," he responded, determination solidifying his stance. Jordan paused, his facade wavering slightly. "I never pegged you as someone who would abandon ambition. There's a fine line between idealism and reality." "Perhaps, but I've discovered what truly feeds my spirit," Ethan countered. "I no longer need to hold to the old standard of success that once defined me. Instead, I seek to build something genuine, something that thrives on connection and trust." A silence settled between them, each man internally grappling with the evolving discourse. Ethan sensed the turning point. He was establishing boundaries, marking the separation of his past from this moment. "I can't say I understand your choice," Jordan finally admitted. "But if you really believe that's your path, I
"Won't stand in the way," he conceded. Yet Ethan could hear the reluctance in his tone. "I appreciate that," Ethan replied, the tension in his shoulders uncoil slightly. "But I want to be crystal clear. Our partnership wouldn't work, at least not when it's rooted in the old metrics of success." Jordan sighed, and in that exhale, Ethan sensed a poignant shift. Perhaps they both were no longer the same men they once were. "Then maybe it's time to redefine what success looks like for you." "Exactly, and it feels liberating," Ethan said, feeling that familiar warmth of conviction filling him. "I'm moving toward creating an agency driven by values, focused on genuine storytelling. I'm happy to share resources or ideas, but collaboration under principles I no longer hold is not an option." As they concluded their conversation, Ethan felt a surge of satisfaction. He had not only navigated the meeting with courage, but he had defined the parameters of who he wanted to be. This interaction underscored his transformation from a player in a ruthless game to an architect of a new type of professional world. Walking away from that cafe, Ethan felt an exhilaration he hadn't experienced in years. The pent-up tension gradually dissipated, replaced with clarity and purpose. He returned to the estate and approached Agnes, who was working in the garden, tending to weeds that once choked the blossoming flowers. "I just had a meeting with Jordan," Ethan announced, a smile creeping onto his face, "and I stood up for what I believe." A proud smile broke across Agnes's face. "See, you've found your voice." "I have," he said, a solid confidence grounding him. "And I'm ready to build something enduring, something that reflects my family's legacy while allowing creativity to flourish." As he strolled through the garden,
thoughts of the agency solidified. He envisioned workshops and community events, giving artists a platform, teaching kids to express themselves. Each idea blossomed in his mind as freely as the flowers around him. Ethan's heart swelled with pride. He was reclaiming not just his heritage, but also paving a future that honored it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues over the estate, Ethan stood tall, breathing in the promise of fulfillment. This was not the end, but an exhilarating beginning. The journey to authenticity, legacy, and innovation was now intertwined, all stitched together with the vibrant threads of his family's story. He had conquered the tumult within, and as a guardian of his past, he was prepared to build a connective bridge to the future. In that moment of resolution, Ethan grasped the potential before him. He was ready to launch his agency. He felt invigorated, confident that the world around him could embrace a new definition of success. It was time to bring his vision to life. Don't wait even one more second before you subscribe immediately to this channel to ensure you never miss an exclusive emotional story that could transform your perspective. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the story flowing. And comment below your reactions and theories about this emotional climax. Remember, sharing is caring. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. True fans of personal overcoming stories know just how important it is to support the journey through these actions.